Hi, Nick. Welcome to the AI Brand Voice podcast. I like to start these podcasts with quite a simple question, really, which is maybe a little bit loaded, but I'm starting to notice that the concept and the terminology of AI can be quite loaded and it means different things to different people. And obviously, I know a bit about your background and what you're building, but straight off the bat, when the term AI is brought up in conversation or it springs into your mind, what does it mean for you specifically?
Um, I actually generally think more about what it means to other people, uh, which maybe isn't a very helpful answer. Um, my background has always been in production innovation. There's very little I haven't produced in some shape or form because I've worked across entertainment, TV, advertising, the whole kind of, I even did a stint in theatre, the whole kind of shebang of performance and production. So when Gen AI came along, I had been looking, from senior level in industry at the struggles that brands had, um, with the fact that the size of the advertising market actually since 2018 has doubled, but the size of the production market has stayed the same. And yet the amount of content being produced has gone up by maybe 400%. So what you now see in the market is this enormous downward pressure on production. Everyone wants more for less. And so when I look at AI, I don't fear it like many people do. I think
Mm.
actually it represents a way to survive and thrive for people if they engage with it in the right way. Um, but at a time when budgets are really dropping, like in comparison to the amount of output required, models are changing. So I actually see AI as an opportunity, not in a self-interested way, but actually in a way for kind of craftspeople, people who make their living out of making content. It is another tool. It is a tool that you have to really think about. You don't use it all the time. You use it when it's appropriate. But actually, I'm always thinking about what it could open up rather than what it could close down. And I think the sense in the world of other people is a fear about it, like it will take something away, which you have to respect. Um, but I don't necessarily believe that is right. I believe people know what it could do in terms of how it could change things or how they feel threatened. I don't think maybe people have engaged enough with it at enough levels to think about what it could open up, what it could change for the better as well. And it's not saying it's all going to be uplands and sunny uplands and meadows and everything else. But it's not as black and white, I think, as sometimes it gets represented. I think it's like all these things much grayer.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think of it in those terms, especially when there is so much hype around. And I think the reason why I like to ask that question is because I think people gravitate to things like
Yeah.
deep fakes and voice cloning and
Yes.
jobs being taken and all the drama and jeopardy that sort of surrounds a new technology being integrated into the way that we work. You touched on it a bit, but I'd like you to expand on it even more. I mean, we're obviously on this podcast today, but I'd like to hear a bit more about what got you here, not necessarily to the podcast, but to forming an AI native creative agency. And the reason why I find this particularly interesting is, sometimes in the circles that I move, especially the technical circles, quite lazily perhaps, and maybe a bit provocative, people would like to sort of claim that agencies and marketing agencies are dead, they're not relevant anymore. But you're creating something incredibly special here, and just like to understand your journey to this point.
Journey from the very beginning or journey from the very recent past?
I mean, I think it's quite clear you're a creative communications specialist, but maybe just a skip along that path to
So,
to this particular
you know,
point.
I I guess in the world of advertising, big, agency groups like BBDO and actually Havas, and then lots of big brands have brought me in to look at production ecosystems, how they work, setting up in-housing, scaling things that way. And so I've always been brought in as a bit of a disruptor. but not for disruption's sake. That's the point. You're not trying to break what doesn't, which isn't already broken. You're looking at how is the world evolving and how do you meet that demand in that new environment. So worrying that there is a technology called Gen AI out there that could disrupt you is almost pointless because it's a thing that's not going to go away. It's already here. So we kind of go, okay, this is where we find ourselves. This is how we need to think about the future. So I guess I've always looked at how can you create great content in a way that works for the marketplace, but creatively also. So a lot of content, and there is a risk in AI with this. People think about scale and adaptation and versioning and all of that long tail stuff, and that's fine. That can be to a degree. To a degree, it can be mechanized, and AI has a role to play in that. I've always pushed myself towards the craft side of the industry. So more, how do you create stuff that looks like $1 million but doesn't cost anywhere near that? And that's a creative nuance. That's about thinking from a producer point of view, a creative point of view about how you produce things, how you come up with concepts. And that's really what I'm all about. So that's also what Nmatic is very much about. It's not about, hey, we can do everything so much cheaper. We can do loads of it. It's like, well, actually, how do we do the really beautiful stuff, but bring the benefits of AI into that world? But critically recognize that photographers, directors, all the different kind of skill sets, editors, CGI artists, all have a very profound knowledge around artistry that can be brought to bear in the AI world. And we talk a lot about hybrid AI. So you don't use AI for everything. Use AI where AI is the right tool. So we make things that are, live action, they're CGI, they're AI, and we're blending them all the time. We don't see a lot of people doing that, but there are some people doing that. Obviously, us amongst them. And I guess that's where we're coming from, and that's the journey that I went on when I saw AI coming down. I was like, okay, this is going to change a lot. When I first started, I was thinking this is great at this stage for testing and maybe stills. I think the technology has moved so incredibly fast that now we find ourselves doing mainly film and stills. A lot less around testing, but that is still part of what we do. And when I say testing, I mean animatics and all those and mock-ups and inspiration and all that kind of stuff. And so I just saw an opportunity to build something in this space that was future ready. But to come back to your earlier point about agencies being dead, I think that's complete nonsense. I think that's wishful thinking. And why would we want them dead? Actually, an agency at its best does amazing work. So I think the question isn't, is the agency dead? I think people who say that underestimate what goes into a good agency and how they advise and how they do the work for brands. And so the question is more, how does AI fit into the agency world and how does it change that landscape? But how do you retain the crafted, the brilliant elements you want to retain? And I think that's the nuance. Another thing you see a lot in the market is loads of people making test ads. Hey, I did this in 5 minutes. No one really thinks A, is that what they want to say? B, is it any good? And AI is one of these things that allows you to get very quickly to things, something like a mock-up very, very quickly. But to get to that to something that's usable in market and keep that consistent and to grow that and to put it across multiple platforms, that's different. And that takes a lot more work. So I think there's a lot of people think this world is going to turn completely upside down. I don't necessarily agree. I think it's going to probably turn more to 45 degrees. It's going to shift. But agencies will still be
Mm.
there. There'll be new types of agencies emerging, new ways of working for sure, lots of change. But I don't think that the big the big agencies are going to disappear. I just think they're going to evolve.
I think you summed it up nicely with this hybrid AI integration. And is that where you're seeing the majority of the landscape going? Is it eventually adopting it to a point where it is naturally integrated into their production
I think
processes?
there's going to be a polarization. I think you're going to see a certain type of creative or brand attracted by an AI only world. And I think you're potentially, and the lowest possible price. And I don't think that's going to end well. I think that's going to churn out an awful lot of substandard work that people will just great. It'll become like the spam of the content world. That's my sense because it's too attractive to certain kinds of cost profile for that not to happen.
Yeah.
I think for the brand building side, and also, just traditional kind of marketing communications, I think hybrid is the world that people will find themselves in, even if they don't realize it now. What can AI do to speed up this process without taking away the quality? What can it do in the production process that actually might take us places we couldn't go to before? Because actually, there's stuff it can do that we couldn't do in other ways. Where may it replace certain things that are actually quite expensive to shoot or do in CGI without actually affecting the overall quality? And that will still have an impact. That will still bring down the cost. It will still bring down the timeline, but it doesn't sort of suddenly completely replace shoots or CGI or these other elements. They will find their place alongside each other. I think there's a very interesting opportunity and debate in what I would call the mid market. I think the top of the tree, where there's more budgets, you'll see a lot of hybrids, but there's choice there. Actually, we want that big actor on this location doing this particular thing. That will still exist. Um,
Mhm.
in the mid market, I could see more AI creeping in a hybrid way, but maybe towards the lower end of the mid market, where you get these kind of 15 to 50 grand outputs. I could see more of them becoming dominated by AI, 70% AI, 80% AI. But I think it's a level of craft within AI that we don't see a lot of yet. And I could see because that's quite attractive. We need harder hitting creative at a price point that's affordable, but it's almost disposable, but not quite. And AI, I think, can really, really do interesting things in that space.
And what are the market expectations? You talked a little bit about price and cost efficiencies. Are you finding that generally that's the expectation, is that AI generated output is going to come at a lower cost? Or are you finding actually in the end from end-to-end production is actually about equal to what it was
No, it's definitely
before?
not equal. When we put it into our workflows, and we're all people that have spent 20, 30 years making things in traditional methodologies, so we know what things cost, we know how they're produced. um, we think it saves, depending on how much AI is in there, anywhere between 20 and 70% on a budget, um, depending on a lot of different factors. It's not as easy as just going, it always saves you 30%. Um, but if a comfort zone, I'd say 30 to 40%. So it's significant, but it's not so easy always just to qualify just in that basis. But what I would say is how brands are approaching it is often there's a misconception about the price and the speed. We've had jobs, quite big jobs, where the client will literally go, so on the timeline, well, do we see it next week? And you're like, no, no, you'll be finished in 12 weeks. And they're surprised. And the reality is, if you shot the things that or did it in CGI, the 12 weeks would probably be more like 24 weeks. So it's still a lot faster, but it isn't instant, because to get the quality, you have to spend the time. The difference is AI allows you to get there quicker, but you still have to spend significant time. So it's cheaper, but not cheap. It's quicker, but it's not instant. And I think there's a big learning curve with that. And there's probably a lot of people promising all sorts of things that actually aren't achievable if a commissioning editor or brand's kind of anticipated output is up here, but actually they're delivering down here, kind of thing. But I think that will
Mhm.
that will flush
And
itself out.
I'm really interested to hear about obviously your experience in these old methodologies, and you're talking about production and camera work and camera crews
Yeah.
potentially. Now, like there's obviously a massive cultural working shift happening then if basically people are going to typically be on location with cameras and editing equipment, lighting, and so on. Now, are we going to be moving to a world where actually that's all channeled through prompting, and actually the prompt becomes the skill set? Is that what's happening in these environments
No,
now?
I still think it's a blend. I don't for a moment believe that filming is going to stop. I do think that a director might go, actually, you know what, we'll do that tracking shot, we'll do that establishing shot in AI, or we'll do this little element in CG, but then we'll take that CG element and we'll grow it through AI to get it to do something. You know, I think it will have inputs into the process. Again, it depends where you're operating in the ecosystem. If you're at the top, I think camera crews, I think all of that stuff will still exist, but you will see AI in the process. AI's been in the process for a while, by the way. You know, companies like Adobe, Premiere, Photoshop, they've all been using it. It's been in our world for quite a long time. It's just Gen AI is the thing that's really kind of shifting it. I think though, mid-level production, low-level production, you will see less of the traditional way of working, but that was already limited by budget anyway, because there's only so much you could do. What I think people maybe don't appreciate is that you could also see an increase in production, but that increase will come because of AI. So suddenly you can do all sorts of things at this 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pound mark that you couldn't do before in camera. And that will be an area of expansion where you'll see a lot of AI, but that's not replacing like for like. It's actually creating new. So it's new for new, basically. And what I would always say to people who are nervous is, you know, if you're a DOP or anything else, you can use AI to your advantage. You can use your skills, your knowledge of how to frame things, your knowledge of how to shoot things, lenses, lighting, all of these things in AI to actually get look and feel in a way that actually somebody else wouldn't. So the idea that you just go on and write something and voila, it comes out perfectly is actually a nonsense. If you have craft skills, you can get much better content out. So that's just a fact of it. But then you have to take it to another layer. How do you integrate it into other workflows? How do you make it actually ready so you could wrap Piccadilly Circus or put it on a cinema screen? How do you keep it consistent? How do you, you know, all of these things? How do you keep the branding absolutely perfect? All of those things are another layer of expertise that has to be brought into the processes.
Yeah. And also with that in mind, how do you know when the production is complete? Whereas maybe in before with maybe slightly more physical elements to it, it would kind of and cost elements. Maybe if there is going to be Gen AI, it's almost like okay, we could add this layer in if we wanted to. We could add this new element. Have you ever noticed
Yeah,
that
well,
becoming a bit of an issue with
it's
clients?
not. I think the issue with clients in production is a tendency in AI to underestimate how much work actually goes into it. So there's a tendency to think, oh, we just switch this, we can swap. And actually, you know, a lot of our productions have 12 to 15 people in them. That's a lot less than if we were shooting in camera. But it's a lot more. Most people think it's like someone in a bedroom somewhere typing. You know, it's way more than that.
Mm.
Um, what we find is clients think they can change more than they can more easily than is possible. So there's always a risk if you're working in this space, you can get burnt by people just, oh, could I just, in a way that if you've done a shoot, it's like, no, you can't. The shoot's wrapped. You know, we're done.
Hmm.
It needs to be. So we actually always put processes in place with shot lists, with very clear consolidated sign off to actually control that because the Gen AI effect is people are learning how to work in it, but they come to it armed with all sorts of preconceptions that, for the most part, are not accurate because it's kind of taken from a clickbait world of you know, journalism that's talking about it in one way without the depth of knowledge to really be able to communicate what's actually happening and what actually needs to happen. Where I think is interesting though is, you know, you think if you're a brand and you've done a big shoot, photography shoot, say, and 6 months later you want a refresh, or there's some shots missing for a particular market. Suddenly in AI, you can actually create those shots. You can create those sequences without having to do a big shoot, without having to fly everyone all over the world, which is actually good news. But also, if you're working in an ethical AI methodology, which is what we always push, you can involve the photographer, you can involve key people in the look and the feel and everything else you need to do. So again, I don't think people are necessarily always coming from that perspective. I think they're coming from a slightly more defensive perspective when they're looking at AI, or they're coming at it from a pure cost and efficiency perspective. And neither of those two extremes are necessarily the correct ones, in my opinion, in how to look at it.
Okay. And then when you're dealing with clients, and obviously the topic of AI, and we're talking about ethics as well, like when you're talking with clients, are they particularly concerned about IP issues and who owns the AI generated output? What's the training data gone behind some of these image generators? How do you navigate those conversations, and have you come across that?
Yes, yes, much less now. Again, largely most of those arguments are obsolete because they don't understand the way it actually works. I think people believe that, somewhere in AI land I exist and I might pop up in a TVC somewhere that was made in AI because it just took me. It doesn't do that. It learns that, this is a middle-aged male. This is what middle-aged males look like. I've now seen 7 billion of them. I can actually recreate them. So the risk on IP is less around the training data because it's the question about how they train their data is a different question. The question of the outputs is really down to the practitioner. So if I, without asking a brand's permission, say Coca-Cola, put Coca-Cola into prompts and told it to give me a Coke can, and I want to put that in an ad, or let's say a famous actor, and I just ran that as an ad, then just in the same way that if I did that by taking their image off the internet or anywhere else and I hadn't licensed it as a practitioner of making content, I would be breaching all sorts of IP rules, and I would be sued. Or certainly I get a cease and desist at the very least. The reality is most of the platforms now are either training on synthetic data or they are training on licensed data. They've kind of moved beyond where the debate was. Um, but again, this idea about creating, the threshold for creating IP is human involvement. So if you just go to Midjourney and go, the cat sat on the mat and it creates a cat sitting on a mat and it's created, there's no IP in that. Obviously, there's no IP in that. And different legal jurisdictions have different views on, is it the person operating the computer? Is it, it can't be a computer because a technology can't own anything. There's various legal debates go on, and that will settle down over time, and that is to be welcomed to create the guardrails that are required in the industry. It's not something I think anyone should fear. The legal jurisdictions need to catch up with the AI companies about the rules, and I think that's good, and that's particularly important also to support ethical AI. But in terms of producing content and producing IP in it, you'll sometimes get a brand with lawyers saying you have to give us all the prompts for all the images. It's like, well, there's about 42,000 of them. Because what they don't realize is the way we work, we cast everything. So the locations are built bespoke. The characters are built bespoke. We then check those characters don't look like anybody that's known or anything else in the world. Every element, and then all put together, will create comfy models to create perfect replicas, digital twins, and things like that. All those elements then come together to create something incredibly bespoke. And then we also use traditional methodology. We might be putting bits of CGI in there. We will be using post-production. We will be retouching. All of these things we do. So very clearly what comes out the other end has very profound human involvement and human direction, that it is IPable and protectable. Um, but most people, and maybe that's a generalization, but I'm assuming most people don't realize that professional grade AI, that's the level to which you're going. You're not just prompting. The problem I think with Gen AI is because people can access all these platforms, they can get, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. They can start generating quite impressive things quite quickly. And therein, I think, lies the challenge because it seems good enough, but probably isn't quite good enough. And there's a lot of what we see as, we're always looking for talent. And you'll see young talent coming through who are phenomenal at prompting, but they haven't necessarily learned the craft skills, or they haven't necessarily really learnt about how intellectual property, marketing, all of those other kind of things you need to think about work.
Mm.
So part of our what we like to do is, try and find that talent, train them up so they're kind of world ready. And then it's the opposite with some of the older ones coming in who are very good at prompting. They know that stuff already. But then for them, it's often getting them to see a different aspect of that world. There is an opportunity here. There's an opportunity to actually expand what you do as a creative, to actually do things slightly differently. As a photographer, you don't have to stop taking pictures. You can still do that. You'll be happiest when you're doing that, but you have other ways of expanding what you do in photography using this technology. So you have to learn to rule it rather than let it rule you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it sounds like you feel like the skill set needs to become way more lateral, that you can sort of
Yeah,
work across different skill sets in a way, and not to
yeah.
be too compartmentalized just to that one specific thing that you do. You need to be way more seeing across the horizon. And I'm seeing that too. And you were talking about how you actually create the casting, you create the locations, almost piece by piece. I'm just wondering how you navigate this concept of the uncanny valley and this AI generated output, and for the viewers and listeners that are unsure of this term, the uncanny valley is this a concept which was coined by a Japanese roboticist, Masahiro Mori, who identified that humans, that there was essentially a cognitive dissonance, if you like, the closer this robotic likeness to humans becomes. And there's this awkwardness between nearly being human and being human, whereas something actually which is quite removed from being human, almost a bit sort of toy-like, it's kind of fine, it looks cute, but in this kind of awkward area where maybe Gen AI imagery sits, have you found that has become, something that clients have brought up? And are they saying that, that style of imagery isn't an imagery for us and our brand, or are they saying it is?
I think it's a mix. I think everybody is, I mean, we work in a number of ways with brands. We don't push agendas on them. We'll try things or go at their speed. People are finding their way. I think you always have to be respectful of the fact that, Gen AI is moving so fast. That's very discombobulating for people. That's the thing I think that people find most stressful about AI. It's not like CGI that, from Industrial Light and Magic, in the 70s up till now has had 50 years to evolve slowly to the work. But AI has done that leap in a couple of years. And that is very discombobulating. And you don't know what's coming next and what can be done. And that for us is like being in the eye of the storm. It's things are constantly shifting and changing. Um, so when it comes to how people approach it, how they see it, I think you have to respect how they feel, how they look at it. Not everyone's going to be a fan of it. And you have to go, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to try to force something on you. But I also think there's an interesting nuance here because, for example, there's lots of companies use CGI in all sorts of ways. Car manufacturers do it, skin beauty products do it, all sorts of people do it. And we don't bat an eyelid at CGI. However, AI is also computer generated just like CGI.
Hmm.
Where's the difference? The difference is the AI. You think it's this machine doing stuff that you don't want it to. And I think over time that will disappear. I think if it looks real, acts real, and everything else, people get used to that. I think the weirdness comes when it's not done well enough and there's something clearly quite weird about it. So again, if it comes back to actors, actors are already licensing themselves into models. Part of the theory being we can reshoot things, I don't have to travel. But at this point in time, AI cannot do what an actor does. That really genuinely powerful, uniquely human emotion you can't create to the same level in AI. Now, that might change in time, but I do think that there is a ceiling of, again, it's what I said at the beginning, knowing what it's good at doing, what it's less good at doing, and actually giving a professional view. You know what? Great for that, less good for that. To your point, yes, if you just did animation style, people would be much more comfortable with that because it feels safely over there. I think the thing is that a real human? Isn't it real? So I think it's an interesting debate, but I think over time, it will become less of a debate as people get comfortable with it. I think AI has a lot of the great unknown in it, which is what people fear. But again, coming back to if you're a small business, if you're a scale up, suddenly using AI, you can, get to markets and get out in market and start competing with far bigger players in a way that you never could by using AI. So that isn't all bad. There are brands out there, whether they're florists or whatever, they're doing incredible things with it. And I think that's really interesting because that's growth for new industries. But again, it's got to be good, which is why you come back to the craft bit. If it looks a bit weird, it's like when you watch a TV show, you go to the cinema, and there's just something off. In my experience, is normally the sound design is off. And you don't notice it. It's only when you really focus in, you go, "That's what it is." And because of the way the human brain is wired, it's very good at going, there's something not right in there. If AI is being done badly, that radar will always go up. Invariably, it's something like the lighting or something else. So that's where that craft element comes in, and that's where that element of knowing when to use it, when not to use it. But is it a thing? Will people look at some things in AI and go, "Oh, I don't know"? Yes, of course. Will that exist forever? No, I don't think it will. Will we probably get new forms of entertainment and content because of it that people will accept as they're just this kind of genre? I think absolutely yes. But I think because it's moving so fast, what it does is it creates a lot of anxiety around it because there's no time for things to settle down. You're just settling down on one concept and you're hit by another one. And I think that's probably what people find discombobulating and threatening if they feel threatened by it or they feel they don't like it. And then there's people like me, evangelists, going, look, if you work in a completely different way, you can see this in a different way, and you can operate in a different way, and you can be ethical in the way you operate, and it's not all bad. But coming back to your very early point, will there be people doing bad things with it? Like everything in the world, somebody invents something over here, somebody else does something that they should be doing
Mm.
over there. Yes, I think that is also true as well. And you'll probably see all sorts of AI fakery that should just be trodden on and made just illegal and properly, prosecuted because that is not an ethical use and that's a terrible use. But unfortunately, there will always be people that will do that.
So, Nick, let's talk about some of Nmatic's recent AI projects. And one that I'm aware of is the work with Phonak and them being a AI supported hearing product and service. I can see that there's Natural Harmony working with an AI native creative agency. Tell us a little bit about that project and how that came about.
That came about. They were launching a new product that they needed to get out into about 6 markets, AI assisted hearing aids. And like a lot of those brands, they don't actually have huge marketing budgets. So, they're not like to go, we're going to go and spend $500,000 making this ad. So they came to market going, look, this is the budget was what I would call the small to medium bracket. And originally they're saying, can you do this in CGI? And having done a lot of CGI, I was like, well, frankly, that you're looking at least $250,000 to do that in CGI. Could you do it using stock imagery? Yes, you could, but you won't get exactly the same animal doing what you want it to do, how you want it to do it. Could you film it? Not on that budget. So the filming alone would have certainly been 120, 150, something like that. It would have been well above where they had. So this was a use case where AI was actually a really interesting one. But again, when they came to us, we considered all the other ways of doing it, which is what we do, which is why we say we're AI first, but we're hybrids. Because if the answer had been different, we wouldn't have done the AI solution, or there may have been a little bit of AI. In this case, the whole thing was AI,
Hmm.
driven by timings. It had a relatively short timeline of weeks, not months. Also driven by budget, which, as I said, was that low to medium level. So nowhere near the threshold you'd get to even open up those other production methodologies. And obviously, it centers on Oscar, who is a rather cute little chameleon. So we just, and that's fairly safe actually. It's not human, it's a chameleon. It's
Hmm.
in that kind of space. So that's how we did it. We had to put a little bit of humor in it in places. We wanted to make it interesting because the film is about 90 seconds long, I think. And so we added little elements of humor in it, which we could do doing it that way. Uh, in terms of post production, we could get it to change color, but we did do a grade to lift that. So that's a little bit of tradition on the very tail end of it, which we almost do. That sound mix we almost always do traditionally at the moment. Um, and yeah, it's a very charming little film that the client was very happy with. And then we adapted it into Japanese, German, Polish, and a few other languages. There was about six different markets we adapted it into.
So does versioning become a challenge with this type of production method? That's one question, and also another one is the intention to use the chameleon as a fluid, distinctive asset that becomes like a brand character?
So we designed the chameleon. So we cast the chameleon. We had lots of
Mhm.
different options. So Oscar has a particular look, and effectively we've got a digital twin of him. So if the client decided to use him again, I know they like him, then yes, but that wasn't the brief initially. It was just we want to do this film.
Mhm.
Um, but we know they like Oscar. In terms of versioning, AI is actually very friendly to versioning and adaptation. So, um, you know, changing. We've got an example in another case where you can, in a bar, you can change the ethnicity of the waiter serving the drink very, very easily, just literally by market. You can change the backdrops of the bar to make it look more culturally relevant to
Mhm.
that local market. All of those things are entirely doable in AI. And that's when you're blending film with AI. You could also do it AI within AI as well, if that makes sense. But typically at the moment we work in that way. We're working hybrid because we're given the assets and then we're adapting them, but we're using AI to adapt elements of those films.
Mhm.
So they kind of go out to market as a more relevant piece of work for the local market. So in fact, for versioning and adaptation, AI is very adaptable and interesting. It's not an area we're focusing on a huge amount. We do offer it, we do it, but the kind of the tags, the Hogarths of this world who will do it, to the scale of hundreds of thousands of assets, that's a slightly different business model, and they are building their own systems. And I think it will be interesting to see what they do with those systems. That's where a lot of their focus is, the content at scale. We're kind of the content and craft kind of
Mhm.
space.
I'm pleased to hear that. I mean, that sort of global, local thing was always a challenge for me in my most recent roles. But anyway, what's another project you'd like to sort of bring to light that we could talk about? Like
Well,
the digital twins. I mean, you touched on that a little bit, but is that something you wanted to go in on, or?
yeah, well, we're doing a big TV commercial at the moment. That comes out at the end of December. It's for the travel industry. There's a ship in it. That's about all I can tell you at the moment. I mean, I think actually beyond December it'll be fine to talk about it. The That was really interesting because we we had about a 3-day shoot on a ship. We had a day in the studio. So far, so traditional. We have distinct CGI elements in that film. and we also have AI elements in that film. So it's a complete fusion. The tier one production using AI and CGI. CGI is not surprising in a tier one production. AI might be. And that, brought enough effectiveness to the budget that they were able to do what they wanted to do. So that was one of those use cases where actually you can save 20 odd percent or more by using these methodologies to bring the price point down, maintain the quality, and kind of craft something. Within that, we actually created a digital twin of the ship. Now, that was when we first started doing digital twins, we were talking about size of digital twins, how you build them, how you cost them, um, and we were talking about small, medium, and large. The largest one we could conceive of was a car, and the first large one that came along was a ship, which I just find entertaining because it's like, well, that's pretty big. Um, so I think we've possibly created the first AI largest first AI digital twin of a ship. I don't know that if that is a first or not, because who knows who's doing what else out there in the world. But it does mean in the future, as well as an asset now, they can use that in any environment in a very dynamic way that would cost a lot more in CGI than it would in AI. Placing it in positions, shifting its position, whatever you really want to do with it, creating kind of fun things at events, holograms, all of this kind of suddenly becomes possible because of it. And that's really, really super interesting. And that's a tier one example. And so then you've got what I'd call tier three was Oscar. As I said, it's bottom end of tier two, top end of tier three. And in the middle, we're working with a whole bunch of different brands at the middle in that middle tier, doing all sorts of things. Some of it like digital out of home. Again, animals often feature in our work for some reason. We're doing things with medical brands, entertainment brands. We're talking now to broadcasters and doing kind of historical reconstructions and recreations so they can drop that into history documentaries and films. So we're lucky. We're doing a lot, and we're doing it with a very, very diverse portfolio of brands. At one end, um, yeah, we've got TV broadcasters and entertainment companies. At the other end, we've got big kind of pharmaceutical brands, and in the middle, we've got travel brands and banking, and so we've got a really, really interesting portfolio of clients at the moment.
It sounds like you're on a very interesting path. And just as we wrap things up, I'd just like to hear like where you see Nmatic going. What's your vision for the next 5 years, would you say?
So what we want to move from, so we really, really care about the ethical side. And we have something called Nmatic Academy where we're training people and we're training brands because we recognize that actually in this world, this whirlwind effectively of AI, you have to give people anchors and go, okay, this is what you're producing. This is how you use your craft skills. This is where you can use AI. So we're doing that increasingly with brands. At some point, I think we'll open that up wider. And we need to build tech and various things around that. But also we're looking at building out other tech tools to create tools that photographers can use to amplify what they're doing, to use AI. So I think very much we want to get into the space of empowering people to use AI in a crafted way that enables people to amplify what they do or train them in what they do. And then obviously about the studio. The studio will continue as it is, which is producing the work for brands, producing the work for entertainment, probably getting into that, I guess when you look at, how digital agencies operated back in the day, trying to get into rosters as an AI agency, I think there is a space for that. I don't think we're intending to go full creative agency. Let's take on, but that's not really what we're about.
Mhm.
So yeah, so if in 5 years we're doing loads of lovely work, we've managed to move the ethical AI debate forward and protect creators and give them tools to do things, and we've got a great talent spotting, talent development pool. I care very much about that because when I was younger, people helped me. So I think it's very important to try to give back and help within that. Then I'll be happy. But it's very, it's such a fast moving space. it's very, very hard to know. You don't know what's going to happen, where and when. But certainly right now is absolutely fascinating. And we're growing, which is nice. And yeah, I'm very grateful for that. So
And Annabelle's prompted in-house training and demand for long-form content.
yes. So as in, I should talk about
Yeah,
that.
go for it. And then you can do that, and then let
So
people. Actually, no, I'll ask another question at the end about where people can find you.
yeah, so training, as I said, we're working with brands at the moment, big brands, helping their in-house arms to train in AI and then building out workflow tools that they can use in tech. So we've got 3 or 4 brands we're doing that with now. And that we think is a really significant way to move knowledge and value on in the marketplace. And we think that's a really important growing part of what we're doing. For my part, I actually started my career making TV shows. So the fact that I can kind of go back in with AI is really interesting. So starting to talk to commissioning editors about, to your point, what if these are animated characters done entirely in AI, like a whole series just done in AI?
Mhm.
And then at another level, as I touched on, looking at reconstruction, looking at elements that broadcasters might want to use that are done in AI that slot into a bigger production ecosystem. So we're doing a lot more of that as well. But yeah, it's as I said, fascinating times.
And lastly, where can people find you? Potential clients or people interested to come and work with you, or yeah, work for you, work alongside you. Like, where do they need to go?
The website, so Nmatic, so nmatic.ai. And you can just email hello@nmatic.ai, and that will actually come to me and Annabelle. So, so you get straight to us.
Well, listen, Nick, it's been an incredible pleasure to catch up with you. I've learned so much about where the creative industry is moving from you, and I think it's incredibly exciting. I can understand why there is some apprehension at the moment, but I think that you're solving a lot of these answers for a lot of people, and I'm sure that this podcast will be super useful for people to have clarity over that. As you quite rightly said, it's difficult to know precisely where it's going, but I think it's very reassuring for the creative industry and those involved in it that people like you are leading the charge in this way. So, I just want to say thank you very much for being on this podcast. It's been a pleasure, and perhaps we'll do one in the future in 6 months' time and see how far things have moved on.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. And also, people don't need to come to us just with a job or something like that. They can come asking questions because it is all about sharing. It is all about learnings. And, I think a large part of what we do is talk to people a lot of the time. And we do get really interesting curveballs thrown at us, which are actually quite enjoyable because you're like, I'm gonna have to go and think about that. And so please, if anyone does want to reach out, ask questions, then that's absolutely fine. And if not, I'd hopefully see you again in 6 months and we can carry on.
We're looking forward to it. Thanks, Nick.
Pleasure. Thank you.